As many of you may know, the stars don't lie, but people do.
In this video, part 2, we are going to continue taking a look at the astrological charts of Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni, and Blake Lively to see what the stars are saying about them from the perspective of Vedic astrology. So if you haven't seen part 1 of our little series of the analysis of Ryan Reynolds' chart,
We'll put the link in the description to that. Go watch that before you watch this one, or watch this one. We don't care.
yeah, but definitely watch it either way.
This is part 2.
This is part 2. Part 1 was Ryan, and
Today we're going to be talking about Justin Baldoni.
yes.
So let's look at the chart of Justin Baldoni.
Yes, so the first thing we notice with Justin Baldoni is he is a Leo Lagna. This would make the native, or Justin, have a kind of regal, confident, ambitious personality with a strong sense of self-expression and leadership tendencies. A Leo rising gives a bold, charismatic, and self-assured nature. And typically, a person with this rising sign will likely seek recognition and have a strong will.
And one interesting thing that's just kind of coming to mind as we're talking about this, the classical texts, when they're describing the appearance of people, when they talk about Leo rising, it's considered a masculine sign. Mm-hmm. It's also specifically stated that the Leo person, one of the ways that you can confirm that a person is definitely Leo ascendant, is that the lower part of their face is kind of thick and masculine.
Yeah, strong jawline.
Strong jawline. And also you have to see that the moon is also in a masculine sign, or if the moon is in a feminine sign, it will kind of balance that out and reduce that a little bit. But what the classical texts say about the physical appearance of a Virgo, because Virgo is a feminine sign, it's that the physical appearance, especially of the face, it states actually that it's a little bit more faint or feminine. Ryan Reynolds has a little bit more of a kind of feminine features in his face.
So Leos tend to come across people who have jealous tendencies towards them, and feel a lot of kind of envy.
One thing that we can see immediately when we look at Justin's chart is that the ascendant lord, the sun, the lord of Leo, has gone to the 6th house. And when a person's Lagna lord goes to the 6th house from the ascendant or the moon, what you'll see in this person's life is that, no matter how hard this person tries to be a people pleaser or to act or speak in a way that prevents people from becoming their enemies, they will still get enemies. So, no self-help, no how to win friends and influence people, no amount of therapy can make it so that a person with this kind of placement doesn't get people envying them.
Right.
So this is something that he's kind of having to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really about what the rest of the chart is saying and whether this person can overcome these challenges and these dealings with enemies, and their will and their efforts into doing that.
Yeah.
And as we continue to look through Justin's chart, we might get some clues.
Yeah, it's important to clarify that Lagna Lord in the 6th house isn't going to completely curse a person.
No.
There are a lot of other things to look for, but it's just that, for example, if you have this placement, there's always going to be somebody that has a problem. It's just something that this person will always have to deal with.
This person's going to always have to overcome obstacles in their life. With Justin's sun being in Capricorn, which is a sign ruled by Saturn, this suggests that a very practical and ambitious approach with a lot of effort and hard work would get those results of kind of overcoming the challenges.
Yeah, and one more positive thing to say about that position is that the sun, as a mildly malefic planet, does like to be in the 6th house. Malefic planets kind of enjoy being in the 6th house in the sense that it's a house that is related to malefic things. So a malefic planet there can naturally express its inclination to crush enemies.
So if we move to looking at Justin's third house, there's a couple things just right off the bat that I noticed. First of all, the moon's there. I noticed there's 3 planets, so that's considered a cluster. Anytime there's a cluster of planets in a sign or a house, that's it's going to have a lot of energy. There's going to be a lot of varying energies going on there. And the moon is in Libra for Justin, and also the moon is in Libra for Ryan. So
in the same nakshatra.
Swati. You can have 2 people with their moon in the same sign, as Ryan and Justin do. Mm-hmm. However, they're extremely different, and their moon is going to present very differently because, of course, of the other circumstances of their chart.
So what we're analyzing here now is his Chandra Lagna. We're looking at his chart from the position of the moon. Where is the moon placed, and what planets is it with and aspected by, and things like that. And if you remember back to our first video about this situation where we talked a lot more about Ryan, his moon is in a extremely complicated and difficult position. And we're going to see as we go through with Justin, there's also some difficulty with the moon, and with Blake, there's difficulty. So all 3 of these people, because the moon represents the mind, all 3 of these people are dealing with a lot of mental strain and difficulty.
For Justin, we have the moon sitting with both Mars and Saturn, which are both malefic planets. Do we have any benefic relief there?
We don't have any aspect from a benefic saving the situation. If you look in the Navamsha to confirm the D9 chart, the moon is also conjunct K2, and it is receiving the 10th aspect of Saturn, and it does not also still have a benefic aspect saving it. So that confirms that the moon is somewhat afflicted in this chart.
Yeah, so the only thing I think that's different, though, is we do have, with Saturn sitting there, yes, it's a malefic. However, Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra.
Yeah.
So
that means that the moon is sitting with an exalted planet. So we can see there's going to be some pieces of information that pile up to show that the moon is not quite as afflicted in Justin's chart as it is in Ryan's. So Saturn not only is exalted, but it is forming a Raj Yoga with Mars, because Mars is the 9th lord and Saturn is the lord of the 7th house. So that's Saturn as a Kendra lord sitting with a Trikona lord, which means that it's forming a Raj Yoga, giving it extra strength. Also, the moon in this chart, and this is different than Ryan or Blake, the moon in this chart is not so dark. Justin, in this case, does not have quite as weak of a moon. It's in the waning phase, but it's fairly far away from the sun, so it's still considered semi-bright. So that's going to add strength, another source of strength to the moon.
So this is an intense combination, regardless of all the positive attributes, which there are plenty. So there has been a lot of challenges on his mind. I think he's indicated that he's had a lot of mental issues, not disorders, but just a lot of heaviness.
Difficult psychological issues to work through through a massive amount of self-effort.
Exactly.
And we can see in his chart, most of the negative is more related to the moon and its being afflicted in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And when you look at some of the other areas of the chart that are not related to the moon, so not as much related to the mind and psychology, there's a massive amount of auspiciousness. So that kind of, I think, explains astrologically why you're saying, a lot of his struggles we don't know that much about his life, but a lot of his struggles seem to have been more psychological than external.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe more of a slower progress. And both of that with Saturn, Saturn causes a lot of delay. Saturn also is very, very heavy, so there's a lot of heavy weight on the mind.
And Saturn would not mature until after the age of 35, so we can see that maturation develops slowly over time and probably has accelerated over the past few years or so. There are a lot of third house significations at play here.
Right.
And so...
which is where this combination sits.
And so if you look at from the ascendant, you see this combination that we've been talking about with these malefic planets, Mars and Saturn in the third house, from the ascendant. And malefics in the third house, because it's a semi-malefic house, can be really good at giving a person a lot of ability to be courageous and be also put a massive amount of energy into their self-effort to become successful. But we also have, from the moon as the secondary chart, the Chandra Lagna, we have a extremely auspicious cluster of planets again happening in the third house from the moon. And we'll talk more about that in a bit, but this is a person who becomes successful through their self-efforts. And that is another thing that can make other people jealous and threatened and upset by his existence, because when you are a self-starter, that can be kind of humiliating internally for people who get all of their success through their connections or through nepotism.
Yes, which that's a point for about Blake.
That's a point for another
for Blake Lively, but it's very interesting seeing the three of these charts come together, actually. But so let's actually talk more about that other cluster of planets. So Justin has a secondary cluster of 3 planets placed in his 5th house in Sagittarius.
Just seeing this on the surface, this is extremely auspicious.
Yes.
To have in one of the most benevolent houses, the 5th house, of creativity, of performance, of authorship, of the highest form of communication and self-expression, of past life good karma, of children, of chanting of mantras. I don't know if he's ever experimented with mantras, but I would not be surprised if he did. We have the 3 most benefic planets in a good condition. We have Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury sitting together in Sagittarius, which is the sign of Jupiter, which means Jupiter is going to be strong there, so he's going to be very happy, meaning Venus and Mercury are also going to become happy by sitting with him. So this is an extremely auspicious combination happening in this house.
And it's like Ryan with his very rare cluster of very negative planets. It happens, but it's very rare to see the 3 most benefic planets, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury, all together. And they're in what we call a trine house, which is one of the most important houses in Vedic astrology. And so it's a really exceptional placement for these planets.
Yeah, and these planets placed here are going to create a lot of Raj Yogas in this chart, so status-giving combinations, for particularly through authorship and through performance and through film. There's going to be rise in status and rise in wealth, and that's obvious. But one of the other things that this signifies, as Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury together there in a trine house, this becomes what's called a Saraswati Yoga, which can be related to a person having some connection to or going through a period at some point in their life where they study classical traditions or spirituality. And I think that's really pertinent to his chart, because there seems to be a connection with a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'll point out here real quick that I'm noticing is that he is currently going through Saturn Moon Dasha in Vimshotri Dasha, and this is about going to end very soon, actually, on April 7th. But he's still going to be in the Saturn Mahadasha all the way leading up until October of 2031. But particularly being in the Saturn moon period right now, when all this difficulty is going on, I think, didn't he just go in the hospital or something because of the stress?
Yes.
So this Saturn moon, as we were talking about, is to some degree representing all this mental, psychological stress that's taking place.
Yes.
And the way that you see when that is going to happen most in a person's life is by seeing when that time period of those planets get activated, and that's the time period he's in right now. But if you look a little bit into the future, starting from October of 2031, instead of being in the Saturn Mahadasha, where all of this third house psychological difficulty and struggle of self-efforts is going on, Mercury is part of that super auspicious fifth house combination. So that's a little bit of time to wait, but when he enters his Mercury dasha, if I'm just looking off the bat, it seems like moving forward from October of 2031, he would be ready to receive all that auspiciousness from this fifth house combination of Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury. Mm-hmm. Just looking from the Vimshotri dasha perspective, without anything else.
Yeah, because definitely it's evident that he's already obtained a lot of...
There's already a lot good going on.
Yeah, and he's already kind of reached a lot of different accomplishments, I'd say. So, looking again at this fifth house, where we have kind of that Saraswati yoga, we have Jupiter and Mercury, this can make someone become kind of a teacher, mentor, guide type person. And Justin has written a book, had a podcast, and did like some TED Talks. I don't know if it's more than one, but he definitely did a TED Talk. So he, not only was he an actor, he wrote, like we said, the combination for writing.
Well, all these are all fifth house significations that we're talking about.
Exactly.
Here.
And all of it was based, though, in spirituality, though, in this practice of self, we're looking inward, self-healing, self-improving, and he then became a guide to other men by running groups and helping them overcome the same kind of issues.
And you can see that not only from the fifth house being kind of related to those spiritual things and learning and teaching, and having Jupiter there in Sagittarius, which is the natural ninth house of the zodiac. But if you look at his chart from a secondary lagna that we use in Jaimini astrology called the Karakamsha lagna, he becomes an Aries ascendant. And this really super auspicious combination of three benefic planets in the fifth house goes to another really auspicious and spiritually oriented house, the ninth house of the chart from Aries. And so that can kind of, I think, show us a little bit of that. First, he's kind of learning and practicing on his own about spirituality, and then kind of becoming a teacher of others in all these things that he's interested in. Exactly.
And I think that was like another boost of where he gained a lot of recognition and success. And it did come with its fair share of criticism, of course, as anything would. And
the sun is still in the sixth house, and it always will be.
It always will be. But overall, I think that's something that I think has brought him a lot of personal pride and joy, and helped him to kind of continue his growth journey. And so if you think about Ryan and Justin both, having a lot of mental strain and in kind of internal issues within themselves, but then you kind of compare how they've both dealt with it in life, and of course everyone does have free will and makes their own decisions, but there are things that are in their charts that give them a little bit more of a leg up or ability.
That's where you can kind of see in one person's chart, there's all this affliction to the mind and the psychology, but then there's not really anything that is really saving it in a major or benefic way. Whereas in this chart, there are a whole list of things that are kind of saving or augmenting that weakness of the moon and making it a lot better with a lot of the other positions in the chart. One more thing I can say about this, that fifth house combination really, the fifth house represents your past life good karma. And I think he was saying that he was born into Baha'i, right?
Yes.
And so Baha'i, I don't know that much about it, but what I do know about it, I think it's kind of very extremely open-minded and extremely focused on connecting with the absolute truth itself, rather than it just being a religious identity and a cultural identity.
Yes.
When a person is born into kind of a really spiritual or more spiritual situation like that, that means that in their past life they engaged in a lot of positive karmas which gave them that ability to be born into a better situation like that, rather than being born into a more materialistic situation. And you can definitely see that from this fifth house.
And the blessings of this really auspicious fifth house would have to do with their past life karma as well.
Yeah, so you can see just from that if we're talking about his past life, he definitely engaged in a massive amount of auspicious activities to gain a lot of positive karmas and a lot of spirituality, which again, I think we're going to see manifest a lot more after 2031. Not to say that good things can't happen right now. There's already good things happening, but I think throughout the course of his life, you'll see a lot of blossoming of this potential after 2031.
Yeah. Intensifying Justin's kind of spirituality lifestyle would also be shown with K2 being in the sign of Scorpio. K2 deals with detachment, spirituality, past life karma, and Scorpio, this as the sign, also deals with a lot of hidden knowledge, introspection. So that's pretty much why K2 is exalted there. So this just intensifies his kind of introspective nature, as well as this this path of spirituality that he's experienced and has been a very large part of his life. And the fourth house also represents homes and vehicles. Justin has described that he no longer feels very connected to material wealth, and it's more about the good that he's trying to do with his businesses and his skills and things. So
wherever K2 goes in a person's chart, it can signify in some cases that K2 eventually causes you to kind of let go, because K2 is moksha karaka, so K2 signifies letting go, that you kind of let go of whatever that house represents and achieve some level of transcendence through that.
The other thing I want to say about Rahu, so Rahu also is being exalted in Taurus, which is in Justin's 10th house, which can show a desire for material wealth, luxuries, fame, things like that. And Rahu being there will kind of amplify that. What makes him not focused so much on the material possessions and the actual achievement of fame is that K2's there
also exalted in the fourth house.
Yeah, which is detaching him. So it's kind of...
Well, it gives kind of a dual superpower where if he needs to be ambitious, Rahu represents ambition, and Rahu is exalted in the 10th house of career. So if he needs to be ambitious and materialistic, he can do that in relation to his career, especially to try to get whatever it is that he wants to get. That's going to be natural with Rahu there. But Rahu can also signify a course of action that one would go on that they would then fall back from onto where Ketu is.
Right,
and so it can signify that he has that ability to go out and be super ambitious and through ambition accomplish things and then fall back on the spirituality represented by the exalted Ketu in the 4th house there.
Yeah.
So one quick point here about his ascendant nakshatra. We mentioned in the Ryan video that Ryan Reynolds has Uttara Falguni on the ascendant. I'm bringing this up because there's Falguni energy in all 3 of these people. And Falguni energy, whether it's Uttara or Purva, whether it's the ascendant or the moon or something else, whenever it's activated in the chart, there are a lot of positive things that can take place as a result of the Falguni energy, but the Falguni energy can also be associated a little bit with some promiscuity or interest in things like pornography or perversion to some degree. And there has been talk about him having some porn addiction. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just one of the semi-negative tendencies that can come up with the Falguni nakshatra being activated. And the only reason I say that is because I think that all 3 of the parties in this situation may have a little bit of that tendency that can be activated sometimes towards promiscuousness. So another thing we can point out is that whenever someone is encountering another person, we can see that when Ryan is encountering Justin, his ascendant is Virgo, and Justin's ascendant is Leo. Leo is the 12th house of loss from the ascendant of Virgo. And so when Ryan is encountering Justin, to some degree, and we're not making any predictions from this, but to some degree he's encountering the energy of the 12th house, the energy of loss. And when Justin is encountering Ryan, Virgo is the 2nd house from Leo, so he's encountering 2nd house things. So that's related to speech, that's related to gain, especially gain of wealth. So not saying anything, but that's also related to mental agony. Remember, the 2nd house is a Maraka house, and that can signify mental agony. So when we just even look at Ryan encountering Justin, experiencing 12th house energy, Justin encountering Ryan, experiencing 2nd house energy, we can see kind of how this interaction has played out in the comparison of those 2 charts next to each other.
Yes, and I think after looking at these 2 charts, the vibe I'm getting is Ryan is somebody who he wants to be something. He wants to be this person, but the confidence is actually quite phony. So
and that's something that you can see very obviously in the chart by the condition of the sun.
Exactly, which is confidence, and it's eclipsed by the illusionary Rahu. Yeah. And I think that is just going to cause insecurity and just clearly a relationship that is going to be pretty toxic between the 2.
So one more thing to talk about real quick with Justin Baldoni is when we look at it from the Jaimini astrology angle, which uses sign time periods and sign aspects and Raj yogas or other yogas that are formed by the positions of the movable karakas, like the Atma Karaka, etc. There are some things that become a little bit obvious in Justin Baldoni's chart. So he's about to enter, or actually he just entered on January 23rd of 2025, the Capricorn sign period in Charadasha. And that period contains the sun, which is the natural significator of fame. It is taking place in the 6th house of his original birth chart, which is the house related to court cases, litigations, and enemies. So that's obvious how that's playing out. However, if we look at the chart from Capricorn as the Dasha Lagna, the Atmakaraka goes into the 10th house from Capricorn. Capricorn is also lorded by the Atmakaraka Saturn. And so all of these things that we can see here, among other things, are showing us there is a lot of rise in status happening during this time period. And so that can mean that, yes, he's going to have to deal with this 6th house, which we can already see. And so this might go to court further. But if it does, he's probably going to win. And he's probably going to also experience a lot of positive public recognition with the Atmakaraka in the 10th from the Dasha Lagna. There's a lot of auspiciousness going on. Even though there's a battle taking place, he's probably likely to come out on top.
We hope you enjoyed this video of Justin. Be sure to tune in for part 3 with Blake. And don't forget to subscribe.